Gold has never done what you think it does. There's a story people tell themselves when they imagine collapse. It involves coins pressed into calloused hands, merchants weighing metal at dawn, some reversion to ancestral commerce where gold becomes the lingua franca of survival. In this story, gold is portable wealth, a store of value that persists when paper burns. The logic is seductive because it sounds ancient, and we have been trained to trust anything that echoes the past. But this story requires a world that has never existed during actual collapse. It requires strangers who honor abstractions. It requires systems of trust that evaporate the moment scarcity becomes local and violent. Most importantly, it requires you to misunderstand what gold actually does in the hours and days when order dissolves. Gold's real function is not to facilitate exchange, it is to buy distance from the people who are eating each other. Let me be more precise. The scenario people imagine when they stockpile gold is almost always a kind of prolonged dusk, a managed descent where institutions weaken but do not shatter, where supply chains fray but do not snap, where you can still walk into a room of semi-rational actors and conduct something resembling trade. This is a fantasy of continuity, dressed up as preparedness. It assumes the collapse will be procedural, that there will be a marketplace, that someone will want your Krugerrands badly enough to hand over food, fuel, or medicine at a moment when those things mean the difference between watching your children survive or watching them fade. But gold is not a medium of exchange and collapse. It is a medium of escape. Here is what actually happens. Currencies fail not slowly, but in convulsive lurches. When a government loses the ability to enforce the fiction that its paper has value, the recognition spreads faster than any commodity can compensate for. People do not wake up and calmly decide to start using gold. They wake up to discover that the money in their accounts can no longer summon goods into existence. The grocery stores are either empty or refusing the currency entirely. Gas stations have stopped selling fuel or have begun demanding payment in things they can immediately use or convert. The social contract that made commerce predictable has retracted to the distance you can see with your own eyes. In that moment, your gold is not useful because someone at the market wants it. Your gold is useful because someone at the port wants it. Someone at the border, someone who controls a seat on a plane leaving the country, or a berth on the ship, heading toward a jurisdiction where law still has weight. Gold buys you access to the apparatus of exit before the apparatus collapses. It does not buy you bread in the street. It buys you passage out of the street. This is not a theoretical distinction. Look at what happened when the wealthy fled Argentina in 2001, when Venezuelans with resources began their exodus in 2016, when Beirut's elite quietly moved assets in 2019 and 2020. The ones who escaped early did not do so by bartering gold coins for rice. They did so by converting dense, portable wealth into bribes, tickets, and the cooperation of officials whose palms had not yet become too expensive to grease. Gold was the lubricant of departure, not the currency of endurance. The people who stayed behind, who tried to use gold for daily survival, found themselves in a different game entirely. Because the moment you produce gold in a failed state, you are not conducting trade. You are conducting an audition. You are showing people what you have. And in the absence of law, showing people what you have is the most dangerous thing you can do. Consider the mechanics. You are hungry. You have gold. The person with food knows that anyone possessing gold in this environment either looted it, inherited it, or has more hidden elsewhere. You are not a customer. You are a target with a countdown. The transaction you imagine, a civilized exchange of weight for goods, is a fiction sustained only by the enforcement you no longer have. What actually happens is that the person with food begins calculating whether it is safer to trade with you or to simply take what you have. They are calculating whether you are alone, whether you are armed, whether anyone would notice if you disappeared. This is why gold does not circulate in true collapse. It consolidates. It moves toward whoever has the most power to protect it and the least need to spend it. The people with food do not want your gold. They want more food, or they want the means to defend the food they have. The people who want your gold are the people who already have enough security to think past tomorrow. And those people are not negotiating with you. They are annexing you. There is a deeper error in the fantasy, one that almost no one acknowledges. The entire premise of holding gold for collapse depends on the idea that value is objective, that a yellow metal will be recognized as precious even when the systems that made it precious have dissolved. But value is not discovered. Value is enforced. Gold only matters because centralized powers, governments, banks, markets, agreed to make it matter and then spent centuries embedding that agreement into law and culture. When those powers evaporate, so does the enforcement. What you are left with is a soft metal that is too heavy to carry in quantity and too conspicuous to hide. In a truly collapsed environment, the things that hold value are the things that are immediately consumable or directly convertible into security. Ammunition, because it extends your capacity for violence. Antibiotics, because infection kills faster than hunger. Fuel, because it powers the machines that multiply human effort. These things do not require a shared hallucination about worth. They have intrinsic utility that does not depend on anyone else honoring an abstraction. Gold has no intrinsic utility. You cannot eat it. You cannot burn it for warmth. You cannot plant it, or heal with it, or defend yourself with it. Its only utility is symbolic, and symbols require consensus. Consensus requires stability. Stability is exactly what has collapsed. So why does the narrative persist? Why do people still hoard gold as if it were a talisman against chaos? Because the narrative is not about gold. It is about control. Owning gold makes you feel as though you have taken meaningful action against a future you cannot predict. It creates the illusion that you have purchased options, that you are hedged. The act of acquiring it mimics the logic of investment. An investment is the language of people who still believe the world is a negotiation rather than a series of forces indifferent to their intentions. But here is what you are actually purchasing: the psychological comfort of having done something. You are buying a story you can tell yourself about your own foresight. And that story is expensive because it costs you the resources and attention you could have spent on things that actually alter your survival envelope. Water filtration, medical supplies, skills, relationships with people who will not see you as a resource to be extracted the moment you show weakness. Gold is not a plan. It is a placeholder for a plan. It is what you buy when you cannot bear to confront the specificity of what collapse actually requires. It is easier to purchase coins than to learn how to purify water, or suture a wound, or grow food in poor soil. It is easier to imagine a future where your shiny metal is honored than to imagine a future where no one honors anything except force and scarcity. And this is the cruelest part. The people who will successfully use gold during collapse are not the people who need it for survival. They are the people who already have security, who already have escape routes, who are using gold as a wealth preservation tool in the same way they always have. For them, gold is not about bartering for bread. It is about parking capital in a form that will be recognized once they reach the other side, once they have fled to a jurisdiction where courts and contracts still function. They are not trying to survive collapse. They are trying to skip it. For everyone else, the ones who cannot simply leave, gold is a liability masquerading as an asset. It is weight you cannot afford to carry. It is attention you cannot afford to attract. It is a signal to anyone watching that you have made a category error about what kind of emergency you are in. Because the emergency is not monetary. It is organizational. It is not that the currency has failed. It is that the systems which made currency meaningful have failed. And when systems fail, the question is not what you own. The question is what you can do, who you can trust, and how far you can move before the radius of violence reaches you. Gold answers none of these questions. It simply glitters in your hand while you try to solve problems it was never designed to address. Think about what you are actually preparing for when you stockpile gold. You are preparing for a very narrow window, a collapse that is severe enough to destroy monetary stability, but mild enough to preserve property rights. A collapse where law and order have degraded, but not vanished. Where people still recognize gold as valuable, but have somehow lost faith in every other abstract store of value. Where you can walk into a dangerous environment with a conspicuous form of wealth and not be immediately divested of it by anyone with a weapon and a willingness to use it. This window does not exist, or rather, it exists only in the imagination of people who have never actually studied how societies come apart. Societies do not come apart politely. They do not decline in a smooth curve where you can time your exits and optimize your assets. They fracture, and the fracture is not an event. It is a series of events, each one narrowing the scope of what is possible, each one arriving faster than the one before. By the time you realize you needed to leave, the window has closed. By the time you realize gold will not save you, you're already surrounded by people who have realized the same thing and have decided to resolve the problem through more direct means. What you are holding in your hand at that moment is not wealth. It is evidence. Evidence that you misunderstood the nature of the threat. Evidence that you prepared for a story instead of a scenario. Evidence that you thought collapse would care about your spreadsheet. It will not. Collapse does not care what you own. It cares what you can protect, what you can produce, and how quickly you can become invisible. Gold makes you visible. It makes you slow. It makes you a problem that other people will solve by subtracting you from the equation. And here is the recognition you have been avoiding. If you are in a position where you need to use gold to survive, you have already lost. The moment you are reduced to bartering metal for food, you are in an environment where the rule of law has dissolved enough that property is no longer a meaningful category. You are in an environment where the only thing protecting you is the forbearance of people who have no reason to forbear. And forbearance does not scale. It does not last. It is not a strategy. The real purpose of gold, the only purpose that has ever mattered during collapse, is to buy your way out before the collapse reaches you. It is to be among the people who leave early, who convert their gold into distance and jurisdiction, and the kind of safety that only exists where violence is still outsourced to institutions. It is not a tool for surviving the storm. It is a ticket away from the storm, and it is only valid if you use it before everyone else realizes they need one too. This is why the wealthy do not advertise their gold, why they do not discuss their exit plans, why they move quietly and early, long before the panic, long before the currency spirals, long before the grocery stores empty. They understand that gold is not for the fight. It is for the exit. And the exit only works if you are not fighting for it. Everyone else, the ones who bought gold because they read that it was sound money, that it was a hedge, that it was what smart people did, they are holding a token for a game they do not understand and cannot win. They are holding metal that will betray them the moment they try to spend it. They are holding the thing that will mark them as prey in an environment where predation is the only efficient strategy left. You feel it now, don't you? The creeping sense that the plan was never a plan. That, the reassurance, was a product you purchased because it felt like agency. That the gold sitting in your safe is not a solution, but a weight you will have to explain to yourself when the time comes and it does not do what you thought it would do. It will not. And the people who told you otherwise, the people who sold you the narrative of gold as barter, as sound money, as the foundation of a new post-collapse economy, they were not lying to you. They were telling you a story they needed to believe themselves. A story where the future is legible, where value persists, where the things that mattered before will matter again, just in a different form. But collapse is not transformation. It is subtraction. It removes the layers of complexity that made symbolic wealth possible. It reduces you to the same equation that has governed every human in every crisis. Can you eat? Can you move? Can you defend yourself? Gold does not help you eat. It does not help you move except in the direction of people who want to take it from you. It does not help you defend yourself. It is not a weapon. It is not a skill. It is not a relationship. It is a bet that the collapse will be gentle enough to let you spend it and brutal enough to make it necessary. That bet has never paid out. Not in Weimar. Not in Zimbabwe. Not in Venezuela. Not anywhere the story has been tested against the actual mechanics of disintegration. What paid out was exit. What paid out was being gone before the test began. And if you are still here, reading this, wondering if your gold will save you, you are already asking the wrong question. The question is not what your gold is worth. The question is whether you understand what is coming well enough to know that worth is not the variable that matters. The question is whether you are prepared to become the kind of person who survives not because they owned the right things, but because they understood which things were never going to matter at all. Gold was never one of the things that mattered. You just needed it to be.